He'll be speaking on fiction in the service of truth on the making of the documentary film Freak Show. Hello, my name is Filip Pawlak. I'm a doctoral student at one of Katowice universities and an activist fighting for greater accessibility of cinematography to artists with disabilities. I'm in my 30s, bald, with a beard. My left hand is shorter. I only have my arm without the forearm, and I'm wearing a Free Palestine t-shirt. And it is my great pleasure to talk to you about the making of the documentary film Freak Show, which I made together with Łukasz Ronduda and which will premiere in May this year. Behind me you can see my picture from the performance Freak Show, cast on the wall along the title of this presentation. It's hard to encapsulate all the past years of hard work and often contradictory motivations behind the projects, and to give you a glimpse into all dilemmas we faced. The topic of persons with disabilities in the arts, or more broadly our social presence, is a complex notion that calls for great care and prudence. To begin with, I'd like to start by telling you that what I will utter in a moment is an expression of my personal opinions rather than all those involved in the production of the discussed film. I will also be using general notions in their popular understanding, doing away with intrinsic discursive qualities of theoretical matter. These are obviously intriguing and important academically, but cinematography is not about theory, but about emotions, relations, and protagonists, as well as a business, because it's a business after all. In order to land the money for the project, I had to grind my teeth and see the different commissions adjudicating in our cases who dubbed us cripples or disabled people rather than persons with disabilities. But it's not only about nomenclature, but also about other aspects. Picking up the mantle, I'll tell you this. There's been a lot of pressure behind this presentation in terms of my ruminating over the topic of my address. And the topic is my whole life. I live and breathe it. Representation in art is straightforwardly representation in life. I'd like to could start about the Polish tropes of the T4 Action and the Third Reich, about the origins of the world disability, about crip art, about those overlooked by history, about the American legislation, Jaśmela, Anna, Dynna, and Dawid Ogrodnik, and many other aspects, but I'll focus on something that strikes a note close to my heart. Is there a more complete cinematic protagonist than a person with a disability, a person who is punished for the sins they have not committed? There's a big fuel in place in any dramatic project, from the abject to elation. A great narrative partnership that ensues. So they told me at the film school, or at least suggested that that's the fact. Then there are the visual intertexts about the disabled bodies. Without any detailed context, they appear to be a section of mutants, monsters, and a whole store of imaginary, of mythical stature. They are abject and fascinating at the same time. They are a freak show, and it is the issue of representation that I'll start to, because it's critical to the notion of a freak show. When we started the project development in 2023, we began with anger, with rage about the lack of a representation in art.
Nadia Markiewicz I ja, a naszym pierwszym problemem
The first problem that we've considered was the form to encapsulate our defiance towards the lack of representation of persons of disabilities in arts. And we wanted to find a formula that would be more democratic, less elitist, and targeting more than just representatives of highbrow institutions of culture. We wanted to go down with the film as a mass medium that is egalitarian and far-reaching. We had a sense that popular culture or social perception lacks a representation of disability that would capture our own experiences as individuals with disabilities. An experience that would be far from unequivocal. It will be complex, sophisticated, and rich, and thus challenging artistically. And the common denominator for us was a sense of communal exclusion and loneliness. For the duration of my 11-year education beforehand, I had never encountered a fellow like-minded person studying in the same major that had a disability. This rendered me isolated, and as I became a full-blown adult, it also left me atomized in terms of my political empowerment. It was art that was the first platform for me that helped me use film as a critical tool rather than school, hospital, or any other venues. It was the cinema or the stage that became a watershed moment for me. The discovery thereof was important also in the context of the freak show, and a deep-seated belief that political engagement and commitment does reflect on reality, that this tool is egalitarian and democratic and helps propel social change. On the screen you can see a compilation of 3 photographs, freak show, Lion Man and the drag artist. Nadia Markiewicz, Łukasz Ronduda do a like-minded project in an innovative way, encapsulating them on the screen. The second step was the choice of a genre, whether we should go with a feature film or a documentary, and how would this reflect on our message. Firstly, artists with disabilities want to speak of themselves, they want to empower themselves, and they are innovative in doing so. Secondly, our cripping practices and experiences are deeply rooted in melancholy and rage and in loneliness. We wanted to bring together the themes and anchor them in the grand narrative of history, stressing our everlasting presence therein in a provocative but non-aggressive ways. One that would throw you off balance, but would also hearken to the well-known motives and themes and the communicative.
Zrobić film, który...
In a word, how to make a movie which disrupts the norm and has to be based on it to be readable, communicative, and accessible for investors. In 2024, after experiments with a feature movie film script, continuing our research, we decided to apply a hybrid solution, a creative documentary, taking advantage of the recognized tradition of freak shows and the fact that the protagonists of our movie were to be different people with disabilities, like the Lion Man. We decided that our storyline will be based on documenting the freak show group that we will set up together. A decision on the documentary genre was linked with the major problems we wanted to address in the project. Since facts were lack of representation, lack of artistic archives from the past, the symbolic lacuna in which we operated, knowing full well that there were persons with disabilities in the arts before, we wanted to create an archive that would fill the gap, that would create a new point of reference. A feature movie is, however, an imaginary story that has no power of impact of a documentary, which in common knowledge tells us the truth. However, we do have creative documentaries that told true stories as a feature movie. However, they remained documentaries or witnesses bearing witness to the past. Here we see in the photo, we see a group of protagonists. I will later tell you who these are. We had the creep artists active in operatic singing, Agata Wąsik, drag queen, Babcia, the visual arts and performance, Nadia and Daniel, and myself representing theater, and Łukasz Ronduda and Ignacy Ciszewski, the photography director. Together with this group, we set up a freak show composed of two different elements. We had a freak show, a performance based on earlier research, and a movie under the same title that would document the production of this performance. The creative element was a deliberate choice of choosing the media we would use, performance and film. The objectives were set out from the start. We wanted to follow the emotions of the protagonists and the perception of the performance after it premiered. One of the problems was the attractiveness of disability as a topic. Formal experiments and new ways of telling old stories are widely needed in the world of contemporary art, but they do not attract sources of funding. I do not want to betray or to divulge the whole storyline, because I would like you to go to the movies and watch the movie yourselves in May this year. From time perspective, in hindsight, we had the strongest challenge of sort of persuading institutions to fund our movie. We had to use simplification. Simplification is the price we had to pay for the funding we got. Let me give you a quote from the submission we filed with the film institution. We had Agata, who is a protagonist. Nadia will need to persuade her we'll have to show her the impact of her work in the performance on office work. Her state of health is changeable, and only a full-time job gives her a sense of security. The idea of being again in the limelight will prevail. Being on the stage is a way of finding a partner that she has wanted forever. The stage gives her a sense of intimacy that dating platforms don't offer. End of quote. I am embarrassed by this quote. The health issues, the sense of security, trying to find a boyfriend, a large personal drama that the storyline of a popular movie has to be based on, is the manipulation that the system of funding had to somehow imposed on us. Agata is a fully fledged artist, and her life story is much more interesting than just seeking a partner. We knew full well that the protagonists knew very well that we would present their life stories as maudlin and emotional. However, in order to create a movie I need to objectify my protagonist. I will leave this for further discussion in this hall, but actually the movie industry wants you to do away with your moral compass when applying for funding. We had to well address the political agenda of the project. Not wanting to follow the political issues that currently dominate the political debate, we wanted to focus on the disability and clash it with a large Polish narrative, with a grand Polish narrative, one of the underpinnings of the Polish national identity today, of which persons with disability may not feel being part of. Here we see Hitler in Sopot in the north of Poland on the 21st of September 1939 at the Grand Hotel in Sopot. Hitler convened a meeting of party leaders where he divulged a plan of getting rid of the persons with mental issues from German society. They were considered as unworthy of living. This took the form of a directive known as the Aktion 4, T4. This is a difficult heritage, but this was one of the major inspirations of our performance in our film. The Grand Hotel in Sopot does not commemorate this particularly loathsome event. The Wannsee house, which was the place where the Endlösung Aktion was planned, is commemorated in our mentality. However, the Grand Hotel now is a prestigious hotel used for entertainment. Here we see a photo montage, Hitler standing in a regular room of the currently operating theater, of the currently operating hotel in Sopot. How to call for the presence that we all need here? How far can we interfere in the physical and mental absence, not to be accused of manipulation and lie? In conclusion, I would like to address one more topic related to disability as an artistic tool. I need to beat against the clock, so I will only leave you with some questions. As I was saying, I had some ethical doubts whether what we saw is public or private, is an element of therapy or an independent, deliberate artistic agenda or artistic statement. Do we see actors or people who tell their stories within the limits of their own privacy? Do we have the right to judge what we see, and what kind of criteria are we to apply? Is it exhibitionism per se, or is it still art? In the picture, we see the freak show group, a Picasso painting, and a performer whose name escapes me now. A performer who tears off a deformed mask from his face. The lack of ready answers to the above questions, the perennial doubts, whether we objectify protagonists discomforts us, and this is the kind of discomfort I really aim for. Our art is empowered by this perceptive discomfort. It opens up a new field for constructing and deconstructing meaning. It also displays and makes visible the gaze of innocence and lack of it, just like in patriarchy, a man's gaze constructs a woman. Here in ableism, the gaze of persons without disabilities tells you what's wrong with you. This is so much for my knowledge. How does this relate to the Freak Show movie, though? However, you will all learn this once you have seen the movie. Thank you.
Okay.
Dziękujemy bardzo.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Filip. In a moment, we will transition into a discussion panel on the inclusion of persons with disabilities in cinema, on the screen and beyond. And again, a quick FYI, and to those of you who need linguistic assistance, you may grab an interpretation headset outside from our registration desk in order to tune into this to the discussion.
Okay, so we're ready to go, and I see our eager panelists are already coming in. So we're about to start the conversation of the state of disability inclusion in the industry. That will be moderated by Ravit Turjeman from ReelAbilities Festival, USA. And the participants of this conversation will be Melanie Iredale from Reclaim the Frame, UK. And Filip Pawlak, that you just met before.
Good afternoon, everyone. As just mentioned, my name is Ravit Turjeman. I'm here on behalf of ReelAbilities International. Before we start this panel, I will provide visual description for anyone requiring this. I'm a middle-aged woman with Mediterranean complexion, just above the ears, a black haircut, and I'm wearing a type of a camel-colored beige dress. That's the best I could identify it as. A few words about ReelAbilities. We are the world's leading organization utilizing film as a tool to promote disability, inclusion, and accessibility, both on and off the screen. We've been doing this through multiple programs year-round for the last 18 years. And I'm excited to be here with my colleagues from other parts of the world that are doing similar work, and to provide an overview of the state of disability inclusion behind the camera and in front of the camera in your respective markets and territories. So as you've just heard from Filip about the situation in Poland, from a personal experience, we will zoom out a bit and discuss the state of disability inclusion in the film industry in Poland. And with Melanie here, we will have an insight into the state of disability inclusion in the UK. To start, if you could each introduce yourself, and everyone, maybe someone missed your visual description before, you can repeat it. Please, Melanie, would you like to start?
Hello, and thank you so much to Forum Without Barriers for having me. It's brilliant to see you all. Thank you, and thank you, Ravit. So, as Ravit says, my name is Melanie, pronoun she, her. I'm the director of Reclaim the Frame. I'll say what that is in just a moment. So I am a short white woman with long blonde hair. I'm wearing all black, black glasses, and red lipstick for the occasion. I'm here representing Reclaim the Frame, which is the UK's leading campaign for gender justice in cinema. We were born out of a women's film festival some 20-odd years ago called Bird's Eye View, and operate now year-round, UK-wide, and beyond internationally, advocating for equity in all film spaces. And specifically on kind of gender lines, but with a very intersectional approach. I think Filip has already touched on how our interest in kind of feminist perspective intersects with equity for disabled people and more intersectionally, more broadly. But we'll come on to that. So as an organization, we run training programs and mentoring, consultancy, research, advocacy, and so on. But I think what I'm going to speak to mostly here is we sort of operate between distribution and exhibition. We work with distributors in the UK, a number of 20 plus distributors in the UK to support titles that are written or directed by women or marginalized gender filmmakers, around 18 a year, with a network of cinemas around the UK to promote those films, to build word of mouth, to build audiences and diverse audiences, to promote marginalized perspectives in cinema, and to help enable audiences to feel seen on screen. I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Hello again, my name is Filip Pawlak. I am around 30 years old, already bald, but still with the ginger beard. I'm white, and I'm wearing today the, what is the color? The khaki pants and a t-shirt with the text Palestine will be free. My left hand is slightly shorter than the right hand. I'm a PhD student in Katowice Film School, and I'm expert of the Europe Beyond Access network that has the British origins, but it's now operating in 12 countries in Europe and fighting for to increase the presence of artists with disabilities in the performative arts sector. I'm mostly working as the performance artist or dance artist, but surprisingly I made a movie. So I was really hoping that it will never happen, but I did that.
You sold out.
Yeah, true.
Well, just to put the context out here, I'm sure everyone in this room can probably recite to that, but again, to bring everyone to the same place. Globally, about 1 in 6 people, around 16% of the world's population, live with a disability or identifies as having a disability. In countries like the UK and the US, these numbers are even higher. In the US, latest statistics and demographics data, it indicates that 28% of the population, so 1 in 4, has a disability. Despite these numbers, representation remains drastically low in the film industry, both behind the camera and on screen, with only 2% of the top 100 films or a primetime TV having speaking roles characters having a disability. And this representation gap obviously has even more severe a situation when we're talking about intersectionality with race, gender, LGBTQ plus identities. So if we're looking about, referring to what you've just mentioned, if we're looking at disabled women of color or LGBTQ plus characters, the numbers are so rare that they are statistically invisible, basically. And for the last more than a decade, actually, the numbers did not shift whatsoever. Another interesting piece of information is that from within these 2% characters, speaking characters with disabilities, about 92% of them are acted or in their role are actors that do not have disabilities, so not authentic representation or casting. So with all that being said, we will dive into the fun stuff of what's happening in our respective territories, markets. And I'll start with you, Filip. You just mentioned in your presentation, you gave us a lot of quick data and a lot of personal experience that you've encountered being feeling misrepresented in the media, in performing arts, and taking action about it. And you've mentioned also, you referred to the funding structure and how that determines and affects which stories are being told or how they are being told. Could you, for those that missed maybe the first part of your presentation, and for the purpose of this conversation, zoom out a bit and talk about what type of, or what is the current state of disability inclusion in the Polish film industry specifically? Again, both behind the camera and on screen.
Thank you for question. I think it's obviously hard to summarize, and I'm not the researcher in the representation in media. I'm an artist, so that's only my view of that. But I think it's the representation is really low. The topic is not present. Obviously, we had some TV series with characters that were disabled, mostly Netflix. But when I'm thinking about my education in the film school, not only in the film school, I used to study also the film, the theater arts and the dance. It's lack of representation of students with disabilities. And also the teachers are really old-fashioned in thinking about a disability. It's most of the time it's just an object to use in the drama, in the plot. But it's still not independent topic or character or a story that can be just shared, told from the stage and from the movie. So because of these structural problems with access to higher education, we don't have the voices in the industry that are bringing this topic to the big screen or the big stage. And the circle is closed. So we also, because of we don't have it on the stage and the screen, people are not thinking they can do it or they are represented. So that's the reason they are staying in home. They are not dreaming about becoming the director or actor. And at the end, the system replicates itself. So I, of course, see this like a bit of change. It's something has moved like in recent years, definitely, but it's still a lot of things that has to be done, and it's pretty similar to the queer representation and or people of color representation, like any other not majority representation in the film industry. I think also the problem in Poland is that we are rather small market, definitely smaller than UK or US. We don't have such a money to invest or to try and risk. So the system is like the public funding system is mostly supporting really classical stories or like, you know, normal. Yeah,
Typical.
Typical. Oh, thank you. That's English. It's not my first language. Sorry. So yeah, it's problematic to find real representation or representation how I would think about it.
And you mentioned there is some funding, public funding for a more marginalized storytelling or representation of underrepresented groups. Are there also initiatives to include folks within the system as far as decision makers and executives within the film funds, within the industry to have a say in which stories are being told?
I think we have, but it depends on which level we are thinking about. Like in my practice, I'm always trying to reach the highest one because of the like really big lack of representation. I know in the the local there are local initiatives. There are a lot of like advocates in the field who are trying to bring the topic to the table, but it's not in the major film industry. There's big movies that are made by the majors production studios. So that's the problem. Of course, we have something. We have we have the alternative movies and so on and so on. Students are trying. We have art schools. The public system in Poland is working. We have the ministry funding, but to have the representation in the commercial image in the kinoplex, like in the cinemaplex, it's not working. It's not happening.
Still a long way to go.
Yeah, I think we are still waiting for that. That's the reason that for us it's really groundbreaking that we get this funding from the Polish Film Institute to make the Freak Show movie. To make the Freak Show film, and but to get that we had to lie a bit in the script. Please, yeah, don't tell anyone.
Not lie, be creative.
Yeah, it's a secret place here and discussion. It was just a bit of manipulation to get that, and we already spent that money, so.
That's the work of marketing. You need to present things in a certain way in order to get what you need to get done. To you, Melanie, the situation in the UK is quite different. Specifically, if we're looking into the financial model, a lot of the content is being funded and commissioned by the broadcaster, the public broadcasters, with players like Channel 4 and BBC putting out a lot of content out there. Does that also, and as a result of that, by the way, we do see higher numbers of representations behind and in front of the camera in the UK. The regulation actually works as far as like getting people to do what needs to be done. Unfortunately, we need some regulation and law in order to push this what we would like to have for granted, to push these topics further. How does that translate into the wider film industry work like the work of Filip, the less mainstream commercialized type of work that is out there and representation of disabled filmmakers and creatives in the industry?
Thank you. So, I mean, first of all, I really, really hear what you're saying, Filip, about this kind of vicious circle, and at Reclaim the Frame, we consider ourselves a kind of intervention in that. And I was also really, to your point about funding, I was really struck by what you said in your presentation about the simplification is the price we paid for funding. I was really struck by that we can't only be talking about numbers, we have to be talking about budgets, and we have to be talking about how we support disabled filmmakers to make the films that they want to make in the way that they want to make them. And yeah, so that just, I don't know, just, yeah, pained me. But yeah, in the UK, I guess we have two different systems. So just broadly, of the film directors in the UK, whether film or TV, who are members of Directors UK, which is like the membership body for film directors in the UK, only 6.5% identify as disabled. Worse than that, they earned, on average, £10,000 less in a year. Sorry, I don't know what that is in zloty, but £10,000 in a year less than... Yeah, okay, nice. Thanks for that translation. But the BFI, the British Film Institute, and I will come on to broadcasters, I guess in the UK, sorry, so we have like our, like here, we have our sort of publicly supported film systems, so the British Film Institute, your version of the PFI, and broadcasters, specifically really BBC and Channel 4. Quite often films are supported either by BBC and BFI together, or Channel 4 and BFI together. I have to say they are the lucky ones. There is also films that might be supported by Netflix or other streamers like Apple, so diversity and so on comes into play for them too. But then we have the entirely commercial model of which there is like no regulation, like anywhere else. The British Film Institute issued when they issued their statistics of what they supported through their production funds in 2024, 20% of the creative leadership team, writer, director, producer of BFI-funded projects, identified as disabled. So that's 20 up from 6.5 broadly. So to your point, these kind of regulations and sort of interventions, they do work. BFI has what they call the diversity standards. I'm sure PFI has an equivalent. But they are really good, to be fair to them, on really drilling into ensuring that productions hold themselves accountable, not only for on-screen representation, but for the makeup of the teams behind the camera. And I got to admit, at Reclaim the Frame, that is our primary interest. Our interest is in perspective. It's on who is telling these stories. Now, we think that naturally over time, that will have a bearing on what we see on screen in terms of representation, in terms of authenticity, in terms of tackling stereotypes and so on. But for us, the kind of primary interest is the perspective. And also because we feel really strongly that when we come, when we're talking about, enabling or rather just supporting filmmakers to tell the story that they want to tell, is also that, disabled filmmakers shouldn't only be able to tell stories about disabled people in the same way that women shouldn't only have to tell women's issue films and, and so on and so on. So yeah, these interventions in the UK are working, and then in that respect. And then I guess if we come on to talk about, how to enable these films to be accessible for an audience, there is also kind of commitments there with the broadcasters and the BFI, but we can come on to that. But certainly it is something that I think the broadcasters are conscious of, but they don't publish their stats in the same way that the BFI do. But you can imagine that with public support, like funding, the stats are much better than in the commercial environment, where I think, anyone outside of, cis, white, het, male is considered a commercial risk. But if we then zoom out more globally, there has just been a report published at Rotterdam that said that only 1.2% of filmmakers whose films have played the major festivals publicly identify as disabled. 1.2%. Of course, there will be more than that, but of those publicly. So
yeah, actually, talking about the US, actually, I've just learned about this discrepancy between the reported numbers of producers and directors within the different unions and guilds. Filmmakers avoid identifying as having a disability if it's not a physical, visible disability, in order not to hurt their chances of being employed.
I can understand that.
Yeah, and speaking just like again to provide a little bit of a broader perspective and share a bit from the US perspective. So there, the financial model is completely different from both of these government-based funding and a public broadcaster reliant funding. In the US, there is no such thing, and nowadays even more so. There is lack of funding for whichever funding was before. Now it does not exist. It's even a war situation, and we see that there is some trend. Well, the commercials, the big studios, have their like token one film per year, if any, that might have a character with a disability, but then again, as mentioned before, it's not authentically casted. It falls into the stereotypical portrayal, and it's just another, sobby, sappy type of melodramatic film about the heroic story of a person with disability. But we do, especially thanks to the streaming platforms, we do see some change and more independent cinema that is made by disabled filmmakers is being produced and being made. And that really goes to what you were saying, Filip, about the industry replicating itself. This little, the smaller number of films that are being produced by disabled filmmakers are now having larger audience and bigger exposure through the streamers, and then there is more films being made, and then there is actually a market for these films. They are proven to be successfully, financially successful, and there is more training, and there is the ecosystem that has been created, and we're seeing more and more independent cinema featuring disabled stories in the US, finding their place in the distribution world. So again, it's like tiny bits and pieces, but something is happening. And Filip, I want to ask you, since you started in 2023 with your initiative, you've mentioned there is, you see some improvement. Is there any other example from outside of Poland that you look at and you think that would be like the next step, that's where you want to go, or that's where you wish the industry would go?
I think not, because I'm trying to find a way in Poland, our way, in finding a better representation or inclusion. Of course, we can find some inspirations in UK or US, but based on my experience in working in the performing arts, like copying and pasting here the solutions from another countries, it's not working. It's just based on another culture, another identity, and explaining, like, for example, working in the theater and in dance, where UK is one of the best countries in the world in the frame of the inclusion of artists with disabilities. We were trying to use some of the tools, and of course it did something, but long term it was just not perfect. It was not ours. I think we need to find, as the industry, really our own ways to bring more stories and more people to the screen or to the stage, which is hard, of course, because then we need to fight or risk. But on the other hand, that's how it's happening. Like we cannot find a shortcut. It's art. It's always about the risk. It's always about some beliefs. It's not rational. It has to be one person or a group who will say, we will do it. And they are fighting to do it. And it's maybe not the perfect system, but it is the same system as queer artists or another artists are also struggling with. So we need to just do the same. And that's maybe something that is hard sometimes. And I see it as a risk, maybe more from outside, to have a lot of discussion about the inclusion or the representation, but without saying that it's still a super hard work, that you still need to do a lot to make a movie. It's hard for everyone. not only for disabled or deaf artists. It's a bit harder, but it's still like really hard job, and sometimes I'm missing this part to not create the second system, which in a few countries it's working like that. We have the standard distribution and some special film festivals, which of course it's not terrible, but maybe it's not something where I want to go.
Right. So speaking about distribution, actually, so you went through the challenges of putting together, creating a film, and now what? And oftentimes, as you mentioned, Melanie, the 1.2% that actually made it to some of the major film festivals, many films, the majority of films, make maybe 1 or 2 local film festivals and then disappear from the face of the earth, especially when we're talking about films that are more niche-based or are on the topic of disability. So, Melanie, if you could share a little bit about the work that Reclaim the Frame does as far as distribution and what type of opportunities it provides to UK artists. And actually, I'm not sure if you are also providing any assistance for non-UK films with their distribution in the UK.
Yeah, so I mean, we support international titles, very much, supporting global cinema. Our only remit is that we're supporting films that are written or directed by women or gender expansive filmmakers, and then, as I said before, take a sort of very intersectional approach to that, working with distributors and a network of cinemas around the UK. I guess one of the things that I wanted to speak to on this, I think, is particularly, I know it's kind of maybe skipping a beat in terms of like how these films get picked up for distribution in the first place, but if we can just kind of skip to the end a bit and talk about audiences. And I think, because I think that what we hear repeatedly from sales agents and distributors who are really wary of the risk of taking on, whether that's disabled-led titles, whether or not that's titles that have disability as a theme, or again, more broadly, you could apply it intersectionally, but is there an audience for it? Will they come out for it? Will they pay for it? And I guess our response to that at Reclaim the Frame is, they will if we create an environment that they can access and where they feel welcome and included and needs are catered for. So I think in the UK, if your film is supported by the British Film Institute, it is one of the conditions of the funding that you do have to produce access versions, specifically descriptive subtitles and audio description. But there's little detail in there as to the sort of like how, to what quality and when. So we have this issue of, for example, the access versions might be ready for the release, but not for the festivals. They might be ready for the release, but not for the previews. Most of the work that we do is previews because we are trying to build word of mouth to support the opening weekend box office of that film in order to boost the box office and basically commercial potential for that marginalised filmmaker, in order that when the cycle comes around again, those films are deemed a little less risk. So as I say, if your film is supported by the BFI, then I heard yesterday I had a conversation. I think that you have the same thing here. But I think, this kind of digging into the detail of when these need to be ready and getting, kind of major festivals on board with, I guess just with working with us to help create a demand for these access versions, or, like materials. And we have this constant kind of, I don't know, like a kind of bun fight certainly in the UK, outside of BFI supported titles, and bear in mind we support films from all over the world and not only UK productions, is like whose responsibility is it to commission the access versions? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that they get made? At what point in a film's life cycle? Whose responsibility is it that they're of quality? Whose responsibility is it that they're then translated into all the different languages for the different speaking territories? A sales agent will pass the book to a distributor and a distributor to the producer. And, it's like we just need to agree whose responsibility it is. But I think that therein lies, along with, lots of other kind of measures around how we welcome and include audiences and create more inclusive screening environments, therein lies the answer of a much bigger audience who want to show up for this stuff.
Exactly, and that it doesn't mean that it's the films that feature disability within them or other underrepresented communities within them are not necessarily made only for that crowd, right? And at the same time, people with disabilities that require access or accommodations in order to enjoy cinema are not only interested in watching films about their lived experience, right? So the mindset shift is in multiple layers that needs to be done still. But you're talking about, and actually this is one of the key successes of ReelAbilities. Right from the get-go, we were not looking at films in our selection process. Well, beyond, it's so much in what you said is just resonating well with what we do. First of all, we are not compromising on the quality. You mentioned quality, and if the films are made in a high quality enough way. So first of all, we do not, even though it's a disability film festival, it doesn't mean that we have any compromise on the cinematic quality. The second aspect and the key to our success is the fact that the films are not necessarily about the disability. It's just part of the storyline. It's part of the fabric of life, and creating this, normalization, for the lack of better word, unfortunately, of seeing these stories on screen. That is what moves people and create audiences and create market, and then breaks this loop that we're in of lack of training and creating the ecosystem and showing the distributors and producers that there is financial vitality to this market, right? Beyond the fact that research shows that when film is made in a first-person story with including the disability in an authentic way, it is also producing a better product. And the film is being received well by all audiences. It's just a better film due to its authentic representation. And the third part of what you said that I want to touch on is this, and it seems like being a repeating theme here, also in last night's conversation, the disconnect that happens between the multiple players within the pipeline of the filmmaking, distribution, exhibition, or actually in the first part, funding. So even when there are funding solutions or initiatives for disabled filmmakers or disability teams, then the actual production, providing these accessibility assets that they've been funded, that the funds include having this in place, they're not always ready in time. Even if they're ready in time, then the distributor not always connects the dots and present it to or provides it to the exhibitors in that way. So there is so many points of disconnection that happen, and a lot of great efforts in multiple layers of this pipeline, but there is no one initiative that really just like makes sure that everyone is speaking with one another and that it's out there.
can I just make one more
Please.
point on that sort of, as you say, the players in the pipeline not necessarily talking to each other is, in addition to everything you've just said, I would also say there's mass inefficiencies, because I know that it's going to be a bit different here, but in the UK as one of many English-speaking territories, you know, we could do so much more to share files, you know, to share kind of English, you know, language, descriptive, subtitle files, English language, audio description files with other territories. If only, you know, if what I'm saying is if the sales agent played just a slightly bigger kind of role in this, in helping that sort of dissemination, because I know for certain that we have commissioned access versions, and we've tried to pass those files back up the chain in order that, you know, when the release goes to Australia, for example, you know, please make use of it, you know, like, don't duplicate this work, or not do, even worse, don't duplicate this work. Yeah, and then I think there's also this kind of constant challenge that we have. We work with many, like over 20 cinemas around the UK, is just really working with them to help them see how many people make use of descriptive subtitles. And I think just, you know, we just need to kind of get beyond this idea that descriptive subtitles are only for deaf people or people with hearing loss, because I mean, and if that were the only people that they said, that is okay, but it's not the case. You know, there are people who really benefit in the UK, perhaps like English is their second language, or they just process information differently. Like, so we survey our audiences at Reclaim the Frame. So first of all, 80% of our screenings have descriptive subtitles, and we ask our audiences, all audiences, not only those that identify as deaf or disabled, whether or not they whether or not whether or not they find descriptive subtitles useful, and 82% do. So that goes way beyond those that are identifying as deaf and disabled, and trying to encourage cinemas just to make use of the files that they have, you know, like where they are provided, please use them and don't relegate them to, you know, subtitled Mondays or, you know,
Definitely.
Tuesday mornings.
The curb cut effect, right? You made it for people with disabilities, but it serves everyone. Since I just noticed that we have only 4 minutes left, I had to put my glasses on it. To conclude these conversations, if there is one structural a change that you could implement in your markets, in your countries, in order to improve the inclusion in the industry, what that would be?
I cannot, no. I'm at the first year of my student PhD. They will fire me after that. I think we should get rid of all the guys from the funding commissions. Really, it's a bunch of the same people for many years who are just repeating, who are not learning, who are not. Of course, I'm generalizing. It's like there are few who are trying to find something new in the industry, but majority of them is really looking for the same stories all the time and asking stupid questions as, why we need another story about queer couple or disabled character? Why we need another white couple? Or like, it's, you know, it's so stupid question that it's hard to discuss with it. So, for me, the main problem is the funding system, like the public funding system. How to balance the voice from the industry of people who are working, who are professionals, and who also should be a part of this decision making, who will get the funding, but also how to implement maybe some new thoughts inside of it, or any factor that will push the industry to risk, to use the real force of the public money, because this is public for a reason. It's not for telling all the time the same thing. It's for a public mission. We can call it in different ways, but that would be I don't have a solution how it should look, but I think this is the something that, as the industry, we should start at first discussing, and it's all for this group, marginalized, but also for all the different. It's also for emerging artists. It's for the woman representation, gender balance. It's really not functioning well in Poland. So I would say this. Changing the guard. Yeah.
Diversifying it.
Diversifying it, yes.
Melanie?
So I do have one thing, but I also just want to give an example of how I think that can be done, this changing of the guard. My predecessor at Reclaim the Frame is called Mia Bays. She ran Reclaim the Frame before me a few years, and she moved on to be the head of the film fund at the BFI. And she went into that role saying that she would do it for no longer than 5 years. And at the end of this year, she comes to the end of her term. So I think it's just a rare example that I know of kind of practicing what you preach when, if we all cling on to our jobs in these kind of decision-making roles, then, change can only happen super slowly. So, but the one thing I would change, I think, would be to somehow bring together those who kind of rep production, sales, distribution, and funding together to agree on on how we kind of not legislate, but that's too much, but agree on how, a standard, thank you, a standard for who is responsible for the production and quality sense checking of which materials and by when, so that we don't have this kind of constant, everybody in the pipeline of each production passing the book onto the next person or the next sort of step in the chain, because it seems like we're just not even agreed on whose responsibility it is between production, distribution, exhibition as to who should be creating these. So let's make a standard.
Love it. Thank you so much. I hope
and your?
Well, mine.
Sorry, I know we are out of time, but...
Well, I agree, and it's a conversation I just had before this panel. We do need a body that connects all the dots, that regulates how things are done, and makes sure that there is communication and good use of resources, not overlapping efforts, especially if everyone is complaining that it's so expensive to make things accessible, which I disagree, actually. Nowadays, it's no longer an excuse or reason. But definitely having such body would be helpful for everyone. And not only within the market, but an international one.
Yeah, no, it has to be international.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I hope you can stay outside and answer any questions that might come up, and any ideas and initiatives for collaborations. I'll be outside as well. Thank you so much, and thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.